Hey there, guys. This is Malorian, and this will be a Paintisode, but I noticed that there is going to be some maintenance, so we're going to have some issues here with timing. Normally, I try and keep it to an hour. I definitely have to keep it to an hour today because past an hour is when they're actually going to be doing the maintenance. So I'm going to have to get off here, otherwise it says I can't stop my thing, and I'll basically have to do a 3-hour Paintisode, which, as fun as that sounds, I probably shouldn't do. Either way, what is a Paintisode? As always, a Paintisode is where I'm just going to be doing this for roughly an hour. I'll be painting something. I'll be yapping. The idea is that you're going to be painting something at home at the same time, and at the end, we end up with some painted stuff and good times. I also went and put up a video yesterday asking for people's questions, so I'll be covering those questions today. As to what I'll be painting, and I'm really in a rush here. I didn't realize that maintenance thing, so now I'm trying to rush to work around it. And I can already tell, like, it seems like the quality of the video is a little bit worse as well, so maybe that has something to do with it. But what I'll be painting today is this gun-made solo. So really, he's one of the very rarely seen solos for Signar. I mean, one of the issues is not so much that this guy's bad. It's more so that there's just so many good solos that he has a lot to compete for his 2 points. But in a janky type of list that I'm running here, I think he is just the guy for the job. The caster I'll be taking with him, Kane 2, will be making him Gunfighter, so that makes him, just a little bit better. And as well, it's all about this kind of like forward jam type thing. And this guy being Advanced Deploy in Defense 15. He also has Phantom Seeker, so he can just shoot guys wherever they are. I don't care where you're hiding. This guy is just going to shoot you. And so I think he could actually do the job. Now, again, he's competing for a lot of other things. For example, he is, at this point, going to be replacing Gorman, which is seen as one of the best 2 points in the game. So he has some pretty big shoes to fill. And one of the things I should have done before is done this first black layer. But the nice thing is I have a lot of questions to get to. So while this dries, I can kind of work on that. And between me not having this done beforehand and as well the time restraints, I might not finish my model today. I'll finish it, just not during the actual Paintisode. So I'll do my yapping, answer the questions. I might just have to finish this guy after. Oh, always like when they make little layers that make it so it's hard to get the paint where you need it to be. What this guy has is like this little loincloth that normally the loincloth goes down to like the bottom of the cape, so you don't really have to deal with it. But this one's just a little bit not all the way there, so it just forces you to try and like get down and around and all that stuff. But it will be fine. We'll get around this. But anyway, there's the first color of it. I'll let that first black dry, and we're going to start getting right into these questions that we had here. So the first one comes from, as it loads up, John Tilby. And his thing is, are you getting a new logo for your channel now that you are not an Orc War Boss anymore? He always seems to like push that in, that I don't play fantasy. The biggest thing there is, no, I don't really plan to change my logo. I like my logo with the whole orc with the cowboy hat thing on, the little farmer hat on. It's this kind of thing I've been using for a really long time, and I don't plan on changing that. So one of the ideas, too, is, right now I play Signar, but at some point I could always play Trollbloods, and I really think that the Trollbloods would be looking really good if painted like orcs with a type of green. With one of the models I've done already, Blith and Bull, I've done that green on the trolls, and they look great. So, hey, if all of a sudden next year I'm not doing Signar, I'm doing Trollbloods, well, that could fit right back in, and all of a sudden it's a perfect logo again. All right, next question also from John Telby saying, do you think War Machine could do a battle game with a larger scale rather than just the skirmishes we're seeing in games? The background material describes epic sweeping battles, but the games don't resemble the stories. Well, the stories, you have the same thing in other games too, right? Like in Warhammer, they'll talk about these massive games, which you could do, but it'd be this huge pain. Um, like Monstrous Affair. The same thing happens with War Machine. You could do a lot of like bigger games. They actually have rules for it called Unbound that are designed for the larger games. But I find that when you get really too big, it's just too much. Especially because you find you start to have some issues between the War Machine and the Hordes, where the two are pretty balanced, say at 50 points. If you start going to these larger games, unless you start adding a lot more casters, the problem is that you can only handle so many beasts. And so you can always say, okay, I'll take fewer beasts, and that's not an issue. But then all of a sudden you have this massive army that just has to kill a couple of beasts, and your Warlock isn't going to generate any more fury. So you really do have to keep it either War Machine versus War Machine or Hordes versus Hordes in these larger games, I find, to make them work. But even then, if that's really what you want, if you're wanting to run a big, like large scale, this is a big epic battle, War Machine's not really the game for that. I mean, again, you could do it with just taking more and more models, but it's just not really what the game's designed for. If that's the type of thing you want, you should be playing fantasy. You should be playing epic. So those are kind of the more things that are based around those epic-styled games. Next question here we have from Stephen Walker. Says, you've mentioned that you miss Warhammer. If this is the case, why not play a game every once in a while? I mean, it's still fun. There's no need to quit playing. Well, I mean, the thing is, it's not like I've burned all my models or anything. I still have the orcs downstairs. The biggest thing is I do want to concentrate on War Machine to really get that skills in and to really to compete at a higher level. And even now, I find I'm still not able to get enough games in, just with balancing family and work and all the rest of it, to really get in all the competitive games that I want. And so if I was to mix in fantasy as well, no matter what I add, it's taking away from that War Machine where I need that practice. So, I mean, I'm not counting it out. I mean, if like I've always said, if somebody says, let's do this fun game for my birthday or whatever, sure, I'm game, right? If there's some fantasy charity event, yeah, I'll go to that. But, you know, off for like the casual random game, I'm not going to go out of my way to arrange this. I'd rather do War Machine so I can practice and get to the level I want to be at. Terry Slade saying, as a Signar player, what opposing casters or lists do you fear the most? Well, it's a little bit different. As I guess it has a little bit to do with Signar, but the lists that I fear the most are the ones that have the very aggressive and powerful ranged magic or shooting assassinations. Now, that's personal because I always find I always misjudge my survivability against range attacks, and I get myself killed all the time. That's one of my biggest weaknesses as a player. And so whenever I come up against, you know, Raven or Lilith 2, I am just sweating bullets. Or if I'm up against the mirror match and there's Siege or Kane 2 or something, I am really, really on edge and really, really worried. Now, as Signar does have some weaker casters, so that does kind of relate to Signar, but something that's more general to Signar is Signar loves shooting. So anything that's anti-shooting causes me problems. Again, Lilith 2 with her Shadow Pack. If it's something else that has a lot of stealth, that can be a real issue. If we're talking about Barnabas, where they're all hiding in their pools, or something like LeConte, you know, even though I can build lists to deal with these, I'm needing to specifically worry about them because as a Signar player, they shut down my usual game plan. And again, you can play Signar in a lot of different ways, but for the vast majority, Signar likes their guns. So anything that's anti-gun is a big deal. Scorn is soon going to be a big deal for me because they're going to be getting those new beetle beasts, and they're going to have massive armor against shooting, and that's going to be very, very bad. So I'm going to have to wait, see how I have to deal with that as it comes, but definitely that's the type of things I worry about. Next question here from David Williams saying, hello, good sir, as a fellow Signar player and master of the Jammy Jam, what in-faction models do you think are best at the Jam? Also, I have already have one max unit of Sword Knights and was thinking of getting the Sword Knights unit box to run behind those Sword Knights to act as a cleanup crew. Or should I just get the max unit of Sword Knights? I do have Runewood, which would make those Sword Knight elite cadets, and Reform is great on one unit. Would it be epic on two? Okay, so he's for a second I was wondering if you were talking about running like Storm Knights and say like, well, I guess you are saying Storm Knights. So I'm a little bit confused here if you're talking about like Storm Blades or what have you there. But really, in faction jam, a lot of the jam does really come from mercenaries, but if you do want to stay within faction, especially because you're either a purist or you want to be doing Striker 2 and your feats really affect just the friendly factions, the biggest things that we have for jam currently are going to be things like your Sword Knights. Now, the Sword Knights are going to be really pushing that armor skew. You want to keep them base to base, put Arcane Shield on them. If you have deflection or deceleration, all of a sudden these Sword Knights can be very hard to deal with, especially with shooting, and they can really get up there and kind of lock things down. Now, for some other jam units in Signar, we could be talking about things like gun mages. Again, gun mages normally are just for shooting and don't like to get in combat, but like I'm playing with now, if you run them with Kane 2, they got Gunfighter. So you got these high now defense skew guys, defense 15, that can go run up in combat. They're really fast, and they're shooting things up and doing a good job while they're there. Again, if you want to stick with that high defense skew, why not look at things like Blazers? Blazers can go, they can move up, they can shoot, and then they can reform to tie down what's there. They will have a hard time shooting you. You still have Gunfighter, and you can shoot these things there as well. I see a little comment here is from Soul Reclaimer 65 saying, Malorian Live, oh my God, Christmas came early. Well, I do this every week. Every week on Monday, I try and do this for 8 o'clock. Again, we're on a little bit of a schedule today because Google has this maintenance going on. But yeah, good times. Otherwise, as far as jam goes, you really want something that's advanced deploy if possible and fast and works with one of those skews. Now, if you're looking at advanced deploy, you're looking at your Rangers. They can be really good because they're advanced deploy. They're speed 7. Defense 14 is okay. You know, it's above average. But you could also look at things, say, as like your Commandos, right? Commandos can be an interesting but expensive jam. The good thing they have going for them is stealth. So when they're moving up, whereas some of the other things can be picked off a little bit easier, you just can't shoot these guys. I mean, sure, you can do AoEs and drift and all the rest of it, but you can really hope that, or have a better chance of getting these commandos up there and then being able to charge in. So you're getting that really first strike, be it whether charging and doing that automatic point to damage or just moving up and lobbing a bunch of grenades in their face. But again, 10 points for the 10 as opposed to the 6 points for the 10 Sword Knights. You have to kind of see where you want to go with that. I've also heard that you could be doing the Storm Lances as a jam unit. They're really fast. And again, you're going with the armor skew. You have to make sure that you have the Arcane Shield on them for sure. And the whole idea is you're going to get in there, smash face, and your armor is going to be high enough to keep you safe. Now, again, with all these jams, you have to really be comparing what the cost is and how effective it's going to be. So probably the best out of all these, staying in faction, will be the Sword Knights. Now, going to your next part of the question, which is Archduke Runewood, is he really good to run with him? Well, he's not bad. You know, he is a 3-point solo, but he is a pretty good beat stick. You know, he has a good POW weapon master. He has very good survivability because he just has to stand by a jack and then it passes over the hits to him, to the jack rather. He can really help out your caster because you can, whereas guys like Rupert can't be giving Pathfinder to your caster because it has to be to a unit, he can be giving that to your caster. So he can be really good for that. And as well, he's giving Reform to your Sword Knights. Now, one of the things to keep in mind with that is that it has limited use. What I mean by that is that a lot of times, if you are running up the board, as soon as you're done running, your activation is over. So you don't get to reform. Typically, where reform happens is where you're charging in with your sword knights or just some little melee, and then after, because your sword knights want to be in base to base, they reform to get that armor bonus. But again, with some careful planning and positioning, you would be already in base to base. So what it then really comes down to is the whole idea where you'll charge into a unit, kill the front rank, and then reform, staying base to base to go up to the second rank. Really take away that charge bonus, which is good for them with their being an armor skew, right? So if you can take away the charge bonus, that's awesome. Again, this, as you can tell, this can be very situational. And so for the 3-point investment, you have to be really sure you're getting all the different components to make sure that it's worth that investment. I own 1 unit of sword knights. I was using the hell out of them before I started getting to the mercenaries. And I gotta say, I mean, even though it's not part of the question, man, press gangers. Press gangers are amazing for the jam, but they're not in faction. So let's leave it there because that was your question. One here from Vince Venturella saying, shameless plug, do you think you can mention the Warhammer YouTubers end of year awards since you gave us the idea and all? Yes, I will announce it here. So I know one of the things when I was really more trying to lead on the fantasy guys is it was an idea of having these awards for the different YouTubers. So maybe you have an award for the best battle report, for the best tactics, for the best whatever. But I said, you know, guys, it's the middle of the year. Maybe we should wait to the end. Now it's the end of the year. I'm not really there anymore. So I passed it off on to everybody else. So if you want to go check this out, it is on the Warhammer YouTubers webpage there. On Google+, you can go through them. There's a video that Anthony from the Sustainable Center made, so you can get in through there too. You still have a little while to vote for that, but one of the things I want to talk about this too, because of course I looked at these questions beforehand, is it'd be nice to get this for the War Machine side too. So for the War Machine guys watching, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, we were starting to have a lot of good interaction between the different Warhammer channels. And we were doing things where we're doing videos together, we're doing campaigns together. You know, when one person does a video on an idea, another person does like their counter idea and all the use of it, the rest of it. But we don't really have that here for War Machine. Now, you see that a lot for the podcasts. A lot of the podcasts, they're always being guest hosts on each other's, really supporting each other, doing really campaigns and stuff. But I don't think, and again, I'm new to the War Machine YouTube scene, but it doesn't seem like you see that for the different channels, right? Maybe there's a little bit, let's say like Warhammer Girl and Mini Wargaming, but there's not very much else. So it might be very nice to get a Warhammer, or not a Warhammer, a War Machine YouTubers Google Plus page where all of a sudden we can get more interactions. We can start helping people out. I mean, another nice thing is that if you are a new YouTuber, you can come on there, really get your name out there, which is maybe actually what I need. Maybe I'd be building this for my own selfish gains. But, you know, for a new person, it's a good way to get your name out there and to get some feedback on your channel. So, unfortunately, I don't really have the War Machine pull to get this started like I did in fantasy, but it would be good to see something like this happen. So now going down to advanced maneuvers, which is, you know, one of the bigger ones out there. If you could carry over one concept or idea from your Warhammer Fantasy Times to War Machine Hordes, what would it be? Could be a rule or a tournament format, or even how you interacted with players. Vice versa, what one idea or concept would you have liked to have seen over in Warhammer Fantasy from War Machine and Hordes? Well, that second part I can do really fast and really easy. If I could take the scenarios from War Machine and put them into fantasy, I would do that in a heartbeat. Fantasy needs that very badly to really force you to get to the middle of the board, to really make it so that it's more about going for scenario and not having a Death Star or something like that. That could really, really help over there. Now, as opposed to the first part of the question, which is what we take from fantasy and really bring over to War Machine. And like I said, I read these questions before, and this is one that really had me kind of stumped. as to what I'd really like to have come over. And really interestingly, after I thought of a lot of different game mechanics and things like this, I mean, I think like maybe the rules for chariots could be a little bit more interesting. So we already are starting to get a few more chariot models, kind of. You know, we call them battle engines, but we have Lilith 3, we have Resnick 2, that are these chariot type models, but there's no separate chariot rules. Whereas in War Machine, whenever they get the charge, you get these extra impacts. That'd be pretty cool to see, but there's nothing like that right now. So it always seems like that's missing. As well, something more to do with the building rules. Now, people say in fantasy the building rules are really bad, but it's a part of the game. And I know that if you go to the extra terrain rules, there are rules there for buildings and destroying buildings, but it's just not used in regular play. And it's always seems odd to me that whenever I played fantasy, if there was a building somewhere, it was key. You know, maybe I want to put my range unit in that building. Maybe I want to put my leaders in that building and have a little guard with them to keep them safe. Or maybe I'm going to be using this, so I'll be hopping in the building, and then when they come to get me, hopping out the other side. There are a lot of building tactics that played a very big role. And when it comes to War Machine, if there's ever a building, it's just like, yeah, that's impassable. You just don't move through there. So that does seem to be something that's missing. How would you make building rules for War Machine that would be generally accepted and used? I'm not really sure would be the best one to do that would be functional. Because, I mean, putting models in buildings is just like the issues you have with putting models on hills. You know, with hills are a great and very big part of the game, but they're slanted, things fall off, it's hard to keep the placement right. You have the same thing for a building. You know, like, how do you keep track what's in the building? Would you have to put it on the side and kind of mark it? I don't know. But that's really the biggest thing that came up to me when I was thinking about that. Next question here. And this one, Stephen Walker did answer, but I'll be answering as well. In Horde's War Machine, what's the point of the extra points that the caster gives you? The Trollblood starter, for example, gives you 16 points worth of models, but the caster gives you +6. Does that mean that, and I'm just going to jump to the end here because I think we know where this is going. And then to say at the end here, I'd like to know how Privateer Press's point system actually works. And it's kind of neat because a lot of players, this is kind of different and kind of confusing, especially because coming from War Machine, it's very simple, right? You have a list that's 2,000 points, whatever hero or leader you want to take, it will be worth X amount of points, and bam, that comes out of the list. Well, for War Machine, it's a lot different. They come with either Jack points or Beast points, and it's really free points. So if we're playing a 50-point list, I get to make 50 points from all these different things, and then I also get another free X number of points that I have to take. I have to take either from Jacks or Beasts. Now, it doesn't mean I have to take a 5-point Jack. I could be taking a 9-point Jack and only be paying 4 for it. And so that type of weird math does kind of throw people off. The whole reason for it is the whole idea where these casters are of different power, and so it's kind of Privateer's Press of way of balancing them. But interestingly, it's not in power as far as how good they are perceived. It's power almost as like raw power, or of how much extra models they give you. So for example, like Haley 2 is amazing, but I believe in she's gives you still 5 points. Like Haley 2 is so good, you might think that, man, she should only give you like 3 free points or something like that. But rather, instead, you have guys like Thagrosh 2. He's basically like a dragon. He's big, he's powerful, and that's why he is only +3, as opposed to other casters, which are +6, or even some others are +7. Now, you also have models that come with secondary models. So you have like Nemo 3, you have Kaya 2, and they have these little attachments, free models that come with them. And because of that, they also keep that in mind with this. So again, instead of being +5, they'd be +3. So again, it's just think of them as free points that come from your Jacks. And it really is kind of a weird way of playing the game. But if you would have done it the other way and just say, oh, you know, Thagrosh is 5 points. And if you want to take Haley 2, she's 3 points. You know, you could have gone the other way, but I actually like how it forces you to take jacks and beasts. Beasts would be taken no matter what because it's hordes and you need to generate fury. But I believe that if you did not force someone to take a jack, you would see War Machine armies with no jacks. And that just really takes away the feel of War Machine. So either way, that's how it works. I see an next one here from Sushuru Whisper saying, is there a way to post a question in a chat, or do I have to post a question here in the comments? Just like you did right now, post in the comments. Right, first of all, I'm going to cover all the ones in that last video I posted, 4 questions. And then when I'm done that, I come back here and I'll be answering the ones here. This Paintisode really isn't going to be a Paintisode. Because of the time schedule, I'm really kind of freaked out of needing to get through all the questions before my time runs out for this maintenance. But with that, let's keep going. Philomis, couple of questions here. First one, War Machine or Horde? Now, there's a lot of differences between the two. He doesn't really specify if he says which is the more powerful system, which is my favorite, blah, blah, blah. But between the two, again, War Machine I find to be the system a lot easier. Hordes I find to be a lot more interesting with the way that you have to be controlling your fury. And if I had to, I'm just going to push the question to make a new question. If I had to change the game so it was all one system or another, I would actually change it so it was all hordes. I really love that system where you can push things too hard, but then it might freak out. You know, it would be kind of cool if you saw the same thing on the War Machine side. Currently, you can only allocate a maximum of 3 focus, but let's say, for example, you could allocate 5. But for everyone above 3 you go, there's a chance it's going to freak out. You know, it'd be really neat if they had that same type of mechanic over on the War Machine side. But either way, that's what that one is. Before you settle on Signar, what other factions did you consider and why? Well, I played quite a few factions before Signar. I played Legion, I played Circle, I played Mercenaries, and I played Minions. So dance around there. Oddly enough, I promised myself I'd only ever play Legion, and clearly I got past that. But Legion, I started them because I thought they looked awesome. I love the look of their ninjas running reindeer, and their beasts look really cool, so I started with them. Then I decided I wanted a War Machine faction, so that's where I got into Mercenaries, because it seemed like there'd be a lot of different options and all that cool stuff. Once I started getting into that, I kind of realized that I had a lot of Signar crossover, so I decided, hey, why not play Signar? And I started doing that. Decided that I want to get another Hordes one, so I got into Circle because I thought their beasts looked cool. And then from there I got into Gators because Gators seemed cool, plus it'd be really fast to play. Really, their Journeyman League, where they give you points for playing games and painting, that was a big part of the reason why I picked Gators, because Gators you can paint up super, super fast and lots of points, which is why I won that Journeyman League. Before you settled with Orcs and Goblins, what other armies did you consider and why? Well, man, I played tons and tons and tons of Orc and Goblin armies, or sorry, fantasy armies, but if we're really talking about the ones before Orcs and Goblins, I first started with Bretonnia because I loved the idea of knights and just the, you know, the whole King Arthur type feel to them. Then people were teching against me, so I went to Wood Elves to play completely different skew. You know, I'm not coming at you, I'm running away, and I'm not going for combat, I'm just going to shoot with bows. So that's why I did them. And then after Wood Elves, I played... That's when I went to Vampire accounts, and that's where I was playing them because they were just really strong. I wanted to win, and they were really strong in that edition, and I went to them. And then after that, they had the new starter set that came with Orcs and Goblins and Dwarves, and bam, I started both those armies. What would you say are the most common styles in War Machine Hordes? Is there equivalent to the Gunline, Monster Mash, Triple Malorian Hordes, Flying Circus? There are a lot of different styles in War Machine, and usually there's a lot of mixes, but in general, you are looking at people who are trying to win one of the different ways. So you're either going to be winning by assassination, by a scenario, by death clock, or by kind of like attrition. Now, if you're trying to win by assassination, these are really set up for either ranged assassinations or melee assassinations, and they're really all focused on this one thing. So that'd be like Lilith 2. Next one there is trying to win by scenario. So normally, either that'd be by a control caster like Kruger 2 that with his spells and feat can really control, and then you use an army that supports it. Trying to win by death clock, it's just having lots of models and getting in there. And then the last one there is winning by attrition. And that's kind of more, again, it could be a shooty attrition, could be a combat attrition, but those are your main ones there. People call them by different names. I've heard things like running a brick, right? So a brick is like you just take a couple of really strong beasts or jacks or heavy infantry, and you're running them together. Trolls are really known for this. But I would call this more of a defensive attrition is what it really comes down to. So again, people call things different things, like a gun line, right? Well, what's the gun line for? Is the gun line trying to be shooting you down to kill you for assassination? Or is it just a gun line attrition? So again, I really think it comes down to defining the win conditions and which one they're really going for there. And so as far as comparing that to fantasy, no, it doesn't really, because again, in fantasy, there's only ever the one win condition, get more victory points. So it doesn't really translate over the same way. What's your opinion on the way Privateer Press releases their models with books that give each faction a few new models each time? I think it's great. In fantasy, as a Bretonnian player or Wood Elf player or whatever, you're sitting there forever waiting for a new book and all the rest of it. Here, you know that, okay, first they're having a War Machine book, now they have a Hordes book. And I think that's a fantastic idea. Keeps everyone engaged, keeps everyone having fun, and there's always something new happening to all the armies. And you don't really get the sense of power creep, where it's like, okay, now this army is the big awesome. Okay, now this army is the big awesome. It's really spread around. There's been some other talk about whether they leak the models too early, and I think that's kind of an issue. Really, to me, I almost never buy their books because I can always get the rules on either the Battle College or on the Forward Commander or whatever else. I can just get the card from buying the model. So that seems to be kind of a waste in the way the Privateer Press does it, is that other than needing to get their tier lists, which are in the book, which you can always get if you have the War Room app, you'll be getting that anyway. So it really, if they were to cut back on their spoilers, I think there'd be a lot more books being bought. But hey, maybe Privateer Press to say screw the books anyway, because this is the modern age where you should be going electronic rather than the paper anyway. Next one here saying, what matchups games do you like and dislike the most? I would say the matchups I enjoy the most is where I have a disadvantage. So, for example, when I used to play kind of a shooty Legion, I love playing against Menoth. Menoth has the choir, which can say, hey, you can't shoot our jacks, which was a real problem. So what you have to do is try and outflank them, kill the choir first, and then come back to kill the jacks. And it made it really interesting. As opposed to if I'm playing a game where I have an advantage, either I'm playing against a newer player or they just don't have the tools to deal with what I have, it's like, okay, you're dead, hooray! Kane 2 shot you and you're dead. Guess we got another 2 hours to the next game. Those games aren't really that enjoyable, so I'd rather be playing where it's more of a challenge there, and especially when there's a distinct disadvantage for me, because then if I ever win, it's like, yeah, I pulled that off, Next one here, Philomus again, saying, why do you always do your Paintisodes when I can't see them live? Well, sorry, there's people all around the world. I have to kind of do a time that works for me. Basically, my kids go to bed at 7:30 Alberta time. I do this at 8, and that's kind of the way I got to do it. At least now where I'm putting up that video where you guys can ask your questions, then no matter where you are around the world, just put your questions there, and then you can always catch it after. And normally I would be doing more painting, but again, I got like 20 minutes tops before I should get off here before they do the upgrade, and there's lots of questions left. Death Corpse Karmasar saying, how do you deal with rude players? Also, why does everyone hate Crix? I'm a competitive Crix player, and whenever I play someone, they comment on how overpowered everything they have is. Personally, I think that everything in Crix is average. Its casters, solos, and UAs are the things that make it good. Well, definitely Crix have very good casters and very good infantry, and especially when there's new players looking at them, they're like, wow, this is crazy. Now, one of the things you don't realize is that as a Crix player, you hate being shot. You know, you have all this infantry. Normally, you're very infantry heavy, and if you ever run up against an army that's set up to be anti-infantry, either they have a lot of AOEs or a lot of shooting or a lot of electro leaps, you just get torn apart. And the problem is that since most Crix armies are designed the same, if a player just makes a list that is anti-infantry, it's going to handle most of the Crix. And so, I mean, I really don't think that people should be hitting on Crix, but normally when they do, it's usually the newer players that are hating on the Crix. If you look at the stats, you aren't seeing Crix winning all the tournaments, right? They are, I think, below average for what the amount of, like, for the percent of people who play Crix, you don't get that percent of them winning. So it's really because everyone plans for Crix as well. But the first part there is, how do you deal with rude players? Well, first thing, you could ignore them. If they're going to keep on being like that, you could try reasoning with them. And if that doesn't work, avoid them. That's really your things right there. You know, when I play against someone and they say, oh, yeah, you're playing Signar because you just want to play 40K and shooting, I'll be like, yeah, whatever. If they really keep pushing it, I'll be like, come on, man. This is how it actually works. This is the differences, blah, blah, blah. You know, you can't just run a gun line because then they're going to go up and win on scenario. And if they really keep on pushing that and being jerks and being rude, I'll just avoid them. I don't need that. Mr. D-Man40 saying, hey, Malorian, I have recently started to collect Skaven. How does one get through the grind of painting a horde, lots of models, army? I am not sure if War Machine have these types of armies. Well, I mean, okay, in Skaven, you literally have like 250 models. That's probably about the average. And it is a lot of work to do. In War Machine, even my lists that have lots and lots of infantry are probably around the range of 60 to 70. But really what you need to do to get through these is just do it. It sounds like that's a really dumb way of saying it and very obvious, but the worst thing you can do when you have all this work is do nothing. And that's what you have a lot of players do. They look at this and they're like, wow, I'll never finish this, and then they do something else. Whereas opposed to if you just did one model a day, right? Each day you invested an hour or whatever it was to paint one model, well, within a year, you would paint the entire Skaven army. Now, of course, if you're dealing with that many models, you probably want to start looking into batch painting and saying, okay, today I'm just spraying everything brown. That's all I'm doing today. Okay, next day, I'm going to take these 10 models. I'm just going to be painting their cloth. That's all I'm doing. Next day, those same 10 models. I'm only doing their spears. Just doing their spears. That's it, right? And you have to really do in those batches. Sometimes, though, you might find that especially if you have hundreds of models are exactly the same, you can't do that because after you do those 10 models and then have to do another 10 and then another 10 they're exactly the same, you just can't. It sucks your soul away. So what you want to do is jump between. So okay, right now I'm going to paint up 10 clan rats. Okay, good. Now I'm going to go and do 10 storm vermin. Okay, now I'm going to do a warp lightning cannon. Okay, let's go back and do another 10 clan rats. Okay, I'm done that. Let's paint my BSB. You know, but the biggest thing is just keep painting and just keep going at it. You know, like for me, doing these paintisodes normally is a good way of just saying, okay, every Monday I'm going to be painting something. And then if I want to paint anything extra during the week, that's great. But I'm guaranteed that every Monday I'm painting something. The Death 0706, if I wanted a Kador list for fun games when I am burned out on other games, would you recommend that I pick up cheap, use with Strakov or Harkovic, be brutally honest, and don't be afraid to tell me the truth? Well, with that part there, I mean, you really have to look at what your priorities are. You say you want it to be fun, and you say you want it to be cheap. Now, fun is relative, and that's really the hardest one there. Cheap, I can go cheap. Really, if you want to go cheapest, you want to be looking at the 2-player starter set, get 2 of them, find someone to take the men off, and then bam, you got like an army right there, and you can play. And you could play them with either. I mean, Harkovic could do fine. He has the 2 destroyers he can work with. Strakov, why not? Sure. And that's really where the fun comes in, right? It won't be the perfect, most designed list. I mean, clearly you're being forced to take whatever is in the starter set times 2. But the biggest thing is it'll be very cheap. Cheap being $100, plus I'm assuming you have Strakov and Harkovic here. And so $100 just for a one-off thing here, that's nothing. Probably the best thing I can say for fun then is make sure that you tell your opponent, hey, whatever game just has me burned out right now, I'm just doing this for fun. So that way you won't have a guy that's like, yeah, I'm training for a tournament, I'm going to crush your face in with Gore Shade 3. It'll be like, no, I want to have a little bit more fun with this, and I'm going to take something else. And it looks like I'm taking a call. Hello? Oma, I'm just going to build something right now. Can I call you back in a few minutes? Sure, can be there. Bye. Good. Oh. And there you go. There's taking a call on Malorian Live, which is, of course, where I am limited on time. So the biggest thing you said here, to be brutally honest, the main thing to keep in mind is that you really, really have to keep in mind here what you are after. And I mean, if you think that you can just grab the cheapest models you can and you'll be competitive and that competitiveness is your fun, you're not going to get that. But if you want something cheap and you can be playing some good games, you can definitely do that. Matt Ashaw saying, I have an army question for Warhammer, in particular 1250 or 1500 point games. I am an orc and mostly Night Goblin player who finds it difficult to put together an effective list for small games. I was wondering what your philosophy for building a list when it is difficult to fit in all your hordes and toys. I guess the answer might depend on the meta or the opponents, but do you favor a lower model count so you can keep a smaller number of units, as in 2,500 list, say 20 Savage Orcs instead of 40, and blah, blah, blah? Or would you rather invest those scarce points in one big combat block and spend the rest as support chaff? Again, the biggest issue here is it really depends, like you say, on what you're trying to go after, what type of missions you're playing. But what I find is the best thing to do for smaller games is find out where you can cut out the most points. And for that, it's usually characters. So whereas normally you'll have this big level 4, and you'll have this awesome boss, this BSB. You know what? Maybe just take the cheapest Goblin BSB you can, take the cheapest General you can, put them somewhere safe in like the bunker, and then you have all these points. Now for Orcs and Goblins, you're a really cheap model, right? You got 3-point Night Goblins, you got 6-point Orcs, and all the rest of it. Use that to your advantage. And I usually just go for the numbers there. Take a couple of War Machines to support yourself, but you could still take big blocks of 50 Night Goblins or whatever else, blocks of whatever you want, right? I mean, Orcs and Goblins are so cheap, but I find that just to do that, I find out where I'm going to cut out my points, and I do that then with my characters. Now, again, maybe you're up against lists where they're just going to shred that and won't stand a chance. Well, then maybe you want to go for a shooty minimum list, right? Where I'm going to play almost nothing in characters. I'll take a bunch of little Night Goblin units with Fanatics. Then I'm going to take a bunch of Bolt Throwers and Doom Divers and Rock Lavas, and I'm going to do that. So really, Orcs and Goblins are one of the best armies for it if you can handle the leadership. But yeah, have lots of fun with that. Otherwise, that's all the questions that were on the last one there. I got probably 10 minutes before I should definitely get out. Just making sure that there's nothing new that went on that other one there. Someone talking about ghostly would ruin your day and make your opponent's day. Not really sure what that was. Seeing here that, yeah, I think I caught all those questions. I'll come here, and I think that's really it. Nothing new has come up here, and I really want to make sure that this is done before the whole thing stops. So I'm going to end this one here. A little bit shorter than usual. Unfortunately, okay, trust me. This guy is getting painted. This silly solo that almost nobody uses, I'm going to paint this guy tonight. This is going to happen. I'm going to invest the hour, pass the Paintisode, and this guy will get painted. Hopefully you guys will get some painting done too. I always love hearing what you guys painted, so post it down below. Next week, I'll be doing the same thing. I'll post up the video before asking for questions and then do this. Hopefully Google won't be doing maintenance then, so I won't be feeling so rushed and restricted. And we'll answer the questions there too. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys have lots painted, and we'll catch you later. Bye.